Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the best to worst art creatures beginning with the letter B. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. In at number 7 is the Beelzerbufo. Now, for the past few days, I have definitely given this creature a really bad rep. And to me, this creature is useless in a lot of ways. But loads of you are saying this is the go-to creature for cementing paste, so much so that I will probably try this in future. Possibly I won't go to the extent of breeding one fully out, but I will at least try one of these, and maybe if you haven't tried one before, maybe give them a go as well, and then I will share with you my opinion in future if it is worth having one of these or not. But essentially, the way how you get cementing paste from these things, as when the Beelzerbufo eats any kind of insect, you will just gather cementing paste from it using its tongue or whatever attack you're using at the time. But also, these things are great as ocean creatures as well, as their swimming is very decent. They are a frog after all, what would you expect? They definitely are good swimmers, they're reasonably fast, they don't really have too much in terms of attack, but they can still definitely kill some creatures, maybe not things like mosasaurs, but if you had a good enough level, you'd probably be able to kill something like a megalodon, so overall, these things aren't actually too bad. In at number 6 is the bulb dog. Now this thing is one of Ark's cutest creatures, very close to the Noglin. These things are absolutely adorable and yet ugly at the same time. And the thing is, they aren't just for their looks, they have an extremely useful case on Arboration. When their light is activated, Namelesses and Reapers will be debuffed, and I think Namelesses won't even spawn in the presence of you when you do have a light pet. And that makes it so useful, as they are some of the most difficult creatures you will face on Arboration, and the fact that a creature as cute as this does a really great task is lovely. In at number 5 is the Brontosaurus. This is one of Ark's best berry harvesters by far. I usually tend to use a Diplo because they're smaller, but overall there is a bit sacrilege. A Bronto is going to do a lot better than the Diplo for harvesting. I don't really know why I never transfer over. Either way, the Diplo is a reasonably easy and simple tame if you can get to a high vantage point, or if you're using something like a Griffin, you can simply trank it from above, and then once it's knocked out, just feed it berries, kibble, or any kind of common vegetable. Medjool berries is by far the bare minimum for these things, as they will take a long time to tame. And what would you really expect due to their massive size and massive power? In terms of their PvP use, they don't really have much of one. Apart from the fact they have a platform saddle, they could be a reasonable enough mobile base. In at number 4 is the Basilisk. Yet again, another Arboration creature which everyone at some point should tame, and this thing is incredibly useful for both PvE and PvP. Firstly, for just general use, these things are very fast and they don't tend to get stuck on a lot of things. The only thing is, their turning circle is pretty rubbish, but the Wyvern's turning circle is pretty rubbish, and that is an extremely useful creature. Even the Rex has a rubbish turning circle as well. Also, its second ability can deal torpor as well. This is better for knocking out players instead of creatures, as you'll probably just kill the creature before you actually manage to knock them out, as this attack does do significant amounts of damage. And in terms of its damage, it definitely deals a very reasonable amount. Also, with its berry ability, this can be very useful for PvP, for hiding your own resources, or just being a simple trap for the wary raider. In at number 3 is the Basilosaurus. Now this creature is by far one of the best for doing any kind of ocean tames, apart from the fact that it does take damage at some lower depths, but that isn't an issue, especially on maps like the island, where you will only reach those depths where it takes damage just for the cave entrances. When you're in the cave, you will not be taking any damage at all, apart from the creatures that are in the cave, obviously. Well, the reason why the Basilosaurus is so good is simply because this thing is immune to electric eels and jellyfish. If you haven't experienced that before in Ark, you are extremely lucky, as they are the bane of any ocean trip that you could possibly have unless you are using a Basilosaurus, which is why these creatures are just so useful for caving. They are also reasonably good for travelling around, as their speed is great too. In terms of their taming, these things are a relatively simple passive tame. The only slight annoyance is getting all of the mantas away from it, as mantas will hoard around it, but apart from that, it's relatively easy. In at number 2 is the Stalker. This is definitely a new-ish addition to Ark, as it came out after extinction. That is what I would classify as new, and this is one of the most useful spiders in Ark, and also one of the most useful creatures in Ark. Compared to the Aranio, this thing absolutely slaughters it in every way. Firstly, this thing is extremely mobile and is by far one of the best traveling creatures in Ark, only really being replaced by something like a rock drake or a Maywing. Those creatures are just absolutely insane for travel, but on Genesis Part 1, the Stalker is pretty much your only option for travel, as flyers are not allowed on the map. Yes, pteranodons do spawn, but you are not able to ride them unless you put a simple command in the config files of the game, but I won't get further into that, as console players do not have access to any of those features. The Stalker is an extremely useful tame in terms of dealing damage as well, and also gaining hexagons, which are extremely useful on the Genesis expansion maps. Many of Ark's missions on Genesis Part 1 do use the Stalker, and the same goes for Genesis Part 2 as well. And if you do know how to fly a Stalker, it is extremely useful, as those hexagons from those bog racing missions are just so easy to grab. But if you don't know, you might really consider wanting to learn, as it is a really useful skill that you can have in Ark if you know how to fly a Stalker. Also, once you know how to fly one, it is extremely enjoyable. But before we get into number 1, I want to quickly talk about this channel's membership. If you really enjoy my content and you want to support me more as a creator, then you will have access to our membership. You will get exclusive videos, 3 a week, and also you will choose the topic of those videos yourself. So if that sounds good to you, join the members. And finally, in at number 1 is the Baryonyx. This creature is by far one of my favorite creatures in Ark by a long shot. This thing is an absolutely insane creature for dealing damage. It is by far the best creature for doing caving, and it is just so useful in so many different ways. Also, its size means that it's very small and easy to get into tight spaces, and it does not get stuck on all of Ark's annoying rocks and trees like something like a Rex would do. Also, on top of all of that, their stamina and weight is very reasonable as well. These aren't a bad shout if you wanted a quick carnivore to travel around on. Yes, the Allosaurus may have a bit of advantage in travel, but the Bary size really makes it so much more effective. And also, the Bary size is the reason why this is a great caving creature, as it deals insane amounts of damage for a creature of its size, and it also has a very reasonable amount of health. The Baryonyx can fit into pretty much any cave that you will find, which is why this thing is such a great caving creature, and this is also why I urge you to tame one. With the inclusion of the net gun now, these things are by far some of the easiest tames that you will find in Ark. You simply net it, probably throw in about 10 to 20 tranks depending on the level, and you have yourself a Baryonyx. Also, they aren't a bad shout for underwater caves too, as they have a secret ability in water. If you press C, it will stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Sadly, it won't work for the Plesios or the Mosas, but it is still an insane ability. The only real downside is you have to go to the swamp to tame one of these things, So if you're going out there to tame one, definitely be careful. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. What is your favorite art creature beginning with B? I would like to know, so comment down below. And I will see you all later. Bye.